Oh, we finally got winter here this last week. I've been waiting for it, longing for it, and finally snow came in on Monday and more fell on Tuesday, and the volunteer firemen went down to the lake and they flooded the skating rink and also the ice hockey rink, and they put up the boards and all. And the Christmas tree went up on Wednesday in front of the statue of the unknown Norwegian there in the little park. In the middle, went up right in front of him, the figure of the youth who's looking off to the west and pointing as if to say, yonder, allons, camarados. And now with the tree there, he looks to be saying, this is leaning just a little bit. Just move that over there. The wonders of winter, our favorite season, the one that we were destined for, the indescribable, pristine, unbearable beauty of this world, the nebulae turning in the heavens, and Andromeda there before us, and I can see it now up in the balcony. No, it's an exit light, but it's the stars spiraling on a glorious winter evening. We walk out into nature and we're so elevated from what we know in our daily life, which is just people who can be so terribly disappointing. And it's not greed, it's not pride, it's not sloth. Well, we don't have sloth there, but it's not gluttony, those things that discourage us about people. It's the cynicism, it's the thinking mean thoughts about people you don't even know. People sit in their houses and watch the devout go into church on Sunday morning, and they assume it's out of fear and superstition. They know nothing about the transcendence of the Mass and the beauty of the silences. And every so often the priest says something too, not every week, but some weeks. Says something that sort of clicks. And meanwhile, the devout look at people sitting in their living rooms as they walk to church on Sunday morning, and they think less of them, people whom they do not know. They think, well, they're not going because they're such sinners that they're afraid to face us in church and hear the truth. No, they don't know anything about those people at all. We're ships passing in the night. As my Aunt Eleanor used to say, we are islands in the sea of life, and seldom do our peripheries touch. And Democrats looking down on Republicans, and non-hunters looking down on hunters, and the Norwegians look down on the Swedes and the Germans, and we Anglos look down on everybody. And you'd like to get over it, at least only briefly, during the Christmas time, and be a humanist at this sacred time of year. But there's so few of them in a little town. There's the doctor, there's the undertaker, there's the priest. The doctor looks at the human in front of him, this pale, perspiring, corpulent person. And when the doctor tells you to turn your head to the side and cough, and his hand is there in your crotch, then you are more like other people than you are different from them. You are just one of humanity. The undertaker slides your corpse onto his work table, and he looks down on you. Humanity, just humanity. Be kind. Think kindly of the dead. We will join them soon enough. And the priest in our town, a kindly man, Father Wilmer, chosen by the bishop decided that the old priest, Father Emil, needed to retire. Father Emil was getting to a point where he was mentioning people by name in the homily, looking at them in the sanctuary. He was being very hard on people. He never accepted the reforms in the church. He never accepted the idea of communal confession, reading a confession off a piece of paper about what you did and what you did not do. And this does not suit him at all. He felt, get real. If you're going to come to church, be real about it. Come, tell me. Come sit in here. Sit in this little dark place, and I'll tend my ear towards you and tell me everything. And I know if you've left something out. And when the girl, terrified, sits in the dark next to him and she says, Father, I've sinned. I've had sex and I'm pregnant. He says to her, loudly enough for everyone to hear, He said, Karen, if you didn't want to go to Chicago, why did you get on the train? But Father Wilmer is the new priest, and he's much more kindly, he's much more even-tempered, he's a very sweet man. We watch him, he comes down to the Chatterbox Cafe. We're fascinated by the sight of the priest eating his lunch. Sits there, this man with the bald spot that makes him look kind of monkish, and that little tuft of sort of curly hair up front like a prow. Sits at the counter and he eats his grilled cheese sandwich. And we watch each bite that he takes, and we watch how he enjoys each one and tries to prolong the pleasure of grilled cheese and dabs at his mouth with a napkin afterward. He is a beautiful man. People watch him so closely, of course, since he's a sanctified man. And so they noticed 2 weeks ago when he was reaching his hand down into his pants. Out in public, he was doing this. He didn't seem to be aware that he was doing it. Sometimes in the back, sometimes in the front. He was reaching his hand down. Not a good thing when you're a man of God. Well, they figured out it was because his underwear was slipping down. And he was pulling it up. He was using his underwear too long. He forgot to buy a new pair. The elastic was worn out. Well, they were talking about who was going to talk to him about this. Dorothy went to talk to him. But Father Wilmer was in a bad way that morning. He was trying to fix the carillon, which was programmed to play Come, O Come, Emmanuel on Our Lady of Perpetual Responsibility Church, and it was playing the Marine Corps hymn. And then it was playing Edelweiss over and over and over. And he was cursing it. He was calling God's judgment down on the carillon and also on Rodgers and Hammerstein. And it wasn't a good time to talk to him. So they just went off to Kmart and they bought him a pack of 6 shorts. 6 briefs, black, and they brought it back, and they drew lots to see who would take it to him, and Florian Krebsbach drew the lot, and he walked up to Father Wilmer in the chatterbox, and he handed him the bag, and he said, Father, I've been meaning to give you this. This was left to you by Otto Timmerman when he died. He asked me to give this to you as a gift from him. And it just slipped my mind these 10 years. But here it is. Next day, no reaching down into his pants. It was solved. It took a while, but it was solved. What was I talking about here? Winter. I was talking about winter, this gorgeous winter which has finally come upon us in Lake Wobegon. Of course, it's not like winter was when I was a child, but then neither are we. Winter just doesn't seem to have the energy that it used to have when I was a child. The sky would turn a gunmetal gray when I was a child, and then suddenly the world was white, and a blizzard came swooping down from Saskatchewan and surrounded us there in the country. You had to know where you were at all times from the middle of November on, because it could come down on you like a thief in the night. Suddenly, you wouldn't know where you were. You could be playing out in the backyard. You could have a stick in your hand and you were holding it up to behead somebody, which we did a lot when we played, because we didn't have adult supervision, you see. So our games were inherently cruel and bloody. You could have your stick up in the air and you're about to behead somebody for crimes against the king. We loved to play games that were set in the time of King Louis XIV, after we had read The Three Musketeers, which made a big impression on us. We knew nothing of France until we read about the Three Musketeers and Porthos and Aramis and Athos and their young friend D'Artagnan. I think that's how you pronounce his name. being French somehow was a liberating thing for a kid in the Midwest. It freed you to be more extravagant than the epistles of St. Paul encouraged you to be. They loved sword fighting in the Three Musketeers. They were always pulling their swords out and crossing rapiers. A couple times before breakfast and the rest of the day, they were constantly in sword fights. Good sir, my lord, do me the honor of withdrawing your sword from its scabbard. And they would fight, and so we would fight, and we would fight to the death, and then would come that fatal blow in the breast, somewhere in the breast, up here, down there, somewhere, maybe down here. And you would get to die. You would fall down to the ground. Mon Dieu, you would cry. Mon Dieu, and you would lie there, and they would bring wine. There was a lot of wine in the Three Musketeers. They were never far from wine. There was wine for breakfast and all times of the day. Much more wine than there was in Davy Crockett, for example, or in Little House on the Prairie. There was just practically no wine at all, which really would have made South Dakota much more fun for them. But so we had wine, Kool-Aid, whatever it was, and we lay there dying, and we said, "Long live the king," and we fell back and we died. And this was life in the Midwest as I was a child. It was very gallant. It was a lot of swashbuckling. We did a lot of swashing and some buckling, and we had a great time. But then suddenly you were surrounded by white. Mon Dieu, you were surrounded by a blizzard. And you had no idea where you were, and it helped to have a good visual memory of where the clotheslines were, where the incinerator is, where's the pile of rocks that you picked up out of the garden, and where's the garage. And sometimes you just were lost out there. You stood out there in blinding white. And we had calls that we made to identify each other. Oh, we would call, and our fathers would answer from the door. Oh, and we would find our way back home. Winter was a good thing. You see, we thrive on adversity, young people. We thrive on a challenge. Winter was a challenge. We need these things. You sit at your computer and you're working on your novel for a couple of hours and you're doing great things. And in the euphoria of doing good work, you shut down your computer. And as the screen goes blank, you remember you forgot to save this. It's gone. You boot up again. Auto-save did not save it. It is gone. You must now sit and reconstruct what you did from memory. And you know, it's good for you. It turns out well. You write something better from memory, having left out all of the forgettable stuff. We thrive on adversity, but children nowadays have so little adversity. We work so hard in their behalf to make things good. You find bright children now who do not comprehend that words may sound the same but be spelled differently and mean different things. And when you're talking about where, in the sense of where you are, W-E-A-R, this makes you look dumb. We learned to spell because back then, winter gave us something that focused our attention. The snow came pouring down, but we went off to school in the morning. School was never, ever canceled, even though the roads were impassable. They sent sleighs to pick us up. Out in the country, this was the year of the great snowfall, when the snow knocked out the power lines, and we had no power for months, and we had to read in the dark, which is why I have glasses. And we got up in the morning, they strung ropes from the front doors of the houses, the mile up to the township road, where the bus or sleigh would come to pick us up, and little children struggled through the drifts up to their navels, up to their sternums, being wary of wild dogs in the vicinity. Wild dogs, most of them Cocker Spaniels, who had gotten loose. And because they were small, they would come through the snow at your ankles. They were mean, bitter animals. I don't know if you've ever met a Cocker Spaniel. They're not a pleasant animal. They're seriously inbred. We would wander through. There were bears out there. We didn't see them, but you know, by the time you see one, it's too late. They were out there. There were shadows of bears. We would make our way up to the fort that we had built for our protection there at the bus stop by the road. It was a big high fort, and the girls would huddle in the middle, crouch down, squatting to pull their skirts down around their bare legs, and we boys would stand around the perimeter, as men did in those days. Stand around the perimeter, and then beyond us there was a circle of yellow snow which we boys had created for our own protection, and it worked, may I add. And eventually the school sleigh, came along, driven by a man with a great handlebar mustache and wrapped in a big bearskin with a big whip, driving those ponies along, and we piled in and we got into the sleigh, and it took 2 hours to get to school through the snow. We had to take a detour and go over the river and over the ice and up the other way and past those dark ravines where the last remnants of the Confederate Army were still bivouacked, waiting to kidnap a child and hold him for ransom so as to get the money to rebuild the Army of Northern Virginia and attack Washington one more time. We avoided them all, and we got to school, and by the time you got to school, your mind was focused so that when the teacher put the spelling sheet down in front of you with the different words on it, two, 3 different ways to spell two. We go to the store on our 2 legs. Would you like to come too? Spelled 3 different ways. 4. We learned all of these because our mind was focused by adversity. Adversity, young people. John the Baptist thrived on adversity. John the Baptist, who was sent into the world to proclaim the coming of the Messiah, which nobody was ever going to believe, and he knew it. People were going to think he was crazy. So God did not send John the Baptist to college because college wouldn't have provided him the right sort of challenge. He sent him to live in the wilderness and to wear the skins of wild animals and to eat locusts. And many of us in Minnesota were raised just that same way. Locusts, they're not bad. You're out there, it's blinding blizzard, and you find them under a log. Locusts, they're frozen. They taste kind of like walnuts. They're not bad. That's all the time I have. That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average.